On a night when the wind sounded like memories, a small German shepherd puppy dragged a woman into a snowstorm. He did not come for food. He came for faith. Years ago, Emily Carter failed to save a mother dog dying in her arms. Tonight, in the cold silence of Montana, those same eyes stared at her again, only smaller, wet with fear. No words, just a paw on her hand, pulling her toward the darkness beneath the trees. Some stories don't begin with hope. They begin with regret and the chance to make it right. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. Snow drifts against the cabin walls. Wind presses its cold hands on the glass. The night holds its breath. Emily Carter had learned to sleep lightly in the mountains. She was 45 now, her hair tied back in a plain knot, strands turning silver around the ears. The field jacket she wore year-round hung by the door, still marked by scratches from branches and teeth. Her little cabin, pine walls, diesel heater, the faint smell of coffee and antiseptic, stood alone at the edge of the forest. Outside, the storm boiled through the timber, rolling snow like pale smoke between the trees. She woke before she understood why. Something old in her bones stirred first. Then she heard it, a scraping, small and frantic, at the door. A thin cry beneath the wind, like air torn open. She lay still a second longer, letting the sound pull at her memories. A winter many years ago. The weight of a dying animal in her lap. Breath fading against her gloves, eyes clouding with fear and trust, mixed into one last look. A nest of pups trembling in the snow beside the mother she could not save. Emily rose quietly, the floor creaking under her boots. She reached the door and opened it fast, as if delay could kill a life. Cold charged inside. Snow whipped across the threshold. A small shape stumbled in, a German shepherd puppy, soaked to the skin, black and tan fur clinging thin to the ribs. His ears folded flat with fear. He lifted his head, and Emily saw his eyes, wide, flooded, fixed on hers with a question too urgent for words. The puppy could not speak, but he reached for her. A small paw pressed on her knee. Then his teeth caught her glove, not a bite, but a pull. A direction. Emily crouched, feeling the floor's cold edge through her knees. She spoke softly, voice low and steady, as she would speak to any frightened creature. "Easy, I'm here." The pup tugged harder, his body shook from cold, but the strength in him surprised her. He was only months old, yet there was determination in his grip, something that belonged to a mother's love, carried in small bones. She took the pack always prepared for moments like this. Bandages, antiseptic, cutters for wire, warm cloth, 2 syringes. The habit came from guilt more than training. She hesitated at the doorway. The storm beyond was white chaos. The trees were ghosts. In the puppy's eyes she saw again the look from the past, the mother who lay dying, trusting her too late. Emily breathed slowly, letting the guilt rise through her like old smoke. This time was different. It had to be. She slipped her arm into her jacket. The puppy gave a small, urgent whine, a plea pressed into sound. His collar was a torn strip of fabric, nothing more. Someone once cared enough to tie it, then something terrible took them apart. Emily rose, zipped her coat, and stepped into the night. The wind swallowed the warmth behind her. Snow struck her cheeks like needles. The puppy ran forward, then stopped to be sure. She followed. He limped slightly on his left hind leg, yet he never paused for long. Emily kept her eyes on the faint prints he left. Step by step, she surrendered to his pace. The forest closed around them, dark pillars of pine, heavy with snow, branches groaning under winter's weight. The wind roared, but there were moments of softer sound, her breath clouding the air, the puppy's small claws breaking the crust of snow, the steady thump of her heart. Emily felt the past walking with her, shadow to shadow, each memory a bruise that never healed. She tried to let the cold burn clarity into her thoughts. Behind every rescue was the echo of the one she failed. They pushed deeper into the timber until sky vanished behind swirling white. The puppy turned once more. In his eyes she read a truth that felt like a command from something greater. Trust again. Save what can be saved. Emily tightened the straps on her pack, met the small, desperate gaze, and whispered, almost to herself, "Not this time." She followed him into the storm. Snow swirls between the trees. The forest breathes in white silence. Emily walked behind the little dog, her boots sinking deep into the crusted snow. The wind carried a low hum through the branches like an old hymn sung without words. Her breath rose in clouds and vanished into the storm. The puppy stayed close to her shadow, each step a promise. He was small, 4 months of life at most, his fur matted with ice, paws reddened from cold. Yet he moved with a purpose older than fear. Every few strides he turned his head, looking back at her with dark eyes that held one plea: "Do not stop." Emily answered by leaning forward, letting her weight pull her into the drift. She said nothing. Words had no warmth here. Only movement kept the living alive. The trees thickened the deeper they went. Their trunks, black under snow, rose like pillars of a forgotten temple. Emily's lamp, trembling in her gloved hand, threw thin light over branches and bark. In its beam, she began to see signs that troubled her more than frostbite. A narrow line in the snow, the clean edge of rubber tracks. A broken loop of wire half buried beneath a fir. A patch of fur, long, coarse, black and tan, sticking to ice like a torn memory. Her jaw tightened. She knew those things well. Men cut steel into circles, not for hunger, but for sport. Traps waited in silence. They did not forgive trembling legs or the soft sound of breathing. Emily tasted iron in her mouth. She told herself the storm took the feeling from her tongue, but she knew it was anger. Not loud, not young. A quiet, older anger that wears patience as armor. Snow clung to her jacket, freezing the shoulders stiff. 45 winters had taught her how to keep balance on ice, how to measure risk by the hour of night and the weight of clouds. But this felt different. The urgency did not come from fear of the wild. It came from the pull of the past. A long time ago she had misjudged distance. She had believed she'd arrived in time. The mother had looked at her, trusting the hands too late to save her. The pups had burrowed into the dead fur for warmth. Emily swallowed hard. The memory did not fade with the years. Instead, it refined into something sharper. Regret is a blade that never rusts. The puppy stopped. His body stiffened, tail low. Snow fell from his neck as he pushed forward into a thicket of tangled brush. He barked, not a loud bark, but a cry torn in half. Emily lifted her lamp and cut through the dark with a narrow beam. She saw the snow tremble where something lay hidden. The puppy forced himself deeper, his small body disappearing beneath bent branches. Emily followed, falling to one knee, pushing aside the frozen stems. The light caught the shape of wire, tight as a fist around fur and flesh. She froze, half-breath trapped in her throat. Her hand shook once, like the tremor of a distant childhood fever. A shape larger than the pup, a chest rising in shallow waves of pain. Emily reached out to steady herself against a trunk and closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She felt the storm collapse into silence inside her, like the world paused, waiting for her to decide what she was willing to face again. When she opened her eyes, the puppy looked up from the wire, his fur dusted with snowflakes, eyes wide with something that was not panic anymore. It was trust and burden, and the simple ancient knowledge that mothers do not leave their children alone. Emily took a slow breath. The forest leaned closer, listening without sound. Her lamp flickered once. She felt her heart settle into its old rhythm, the one that belonged to her hands when they healed. Not this time, she thought. She reached forward and saw her. The dog lay caught in the steel snare, blood melting into snow like warm ink spreading through paper. Her fur was thick and strong, her body powerful even in stillness. A German shepherd, 5 winters old at most, built to run long miles across rough country. Her breath came in thin threads, one eye half open, reflecting the light without anger. Only exhaustion, only the last boundary between life and letting go. She did not growl. She did not show teeth. She saw Emily first, and Emily saw a mother. Something inside Emily lowered its guard. She murmured to the puppy, though she wasn't sure he heard through the storm, "I'm here." The words were quiet, steady, shaped by years, and failure and forgiveness slowly learned. The puppy pressed his paw onto his mother's shoulder. Snow fell around them in a hush. Emily felt the old promise rise again, not loud, not broken, but firm. She would save her. The snow settles into quiet. Breath hangs in the air like a fragile thread. Emily knelt in the drift, the cold climbing through her knees like a silent warning. The lamp in her hand cast a pale circle on the ground, showing what the storm had tried to hide. The German shepherd lay half buried in snow, her body caught in a clamp of steel jaws. The trap held her left front leg and hip, a cruel angle that bent strength into stillness. Blood had melted a dark pool into the white, then frozen around the wound in a glassy crust. The dog's fur was thick, black and tan like the pup's, though older, roughened by winter. Her chest lifted in narrow breaths. They came shallow, then paused, as if deciding whether the next one mattered. When Emily leaned closer, their eyes met. There was no fear in that gaze, no anger, only a question, and the quiet plea that comes when an animal has learned that fighting brings more pain than surrender. The puppy pressed himself against his mother's shoulder, his small body shaking with effort as he pulled at the wire. He tried with teeth, with paws, with every instinct that nature gave him. His voice was low, broken by cold, each sound more a grief than a bark. Emily watched the struggle, and something deep inside her shifted, not in surprise, but in recognition. It was the memory of another mother, years ago, whose breath failed in her arms. The hillside had been silent then, too. Snow had been falling the same way. Pups had cried into the fur that could no longer warm them. Emily's hands had been younger, less worn by wind, but the failure had marked them. It had marked her. Now the past sat beside her in the snow, looking through 2 sets of eyes. One fading, one fighting. She placed her palm on the mother's chest, feeling fur and ice beneath her glove. The heartbeat was slow, but steady enough to answer her touch. "Easy," she whispered, though the wind carried the word away before it reached either ear. Emily was not a woman who prayed often, but she understood the shape of a promise. Her body leaned forward, letting warmth from her coat fall over the pup. The light flickered against wire that cut into flesh. Once she might have hesitated, measured options, weighed risk and hope. But time had become a thinner thing here. Only action mattered. Only the belief that saving one life makes the world, its smallest corner, bearable for a while longer. She took the cutter from her pack, the metal cold enough to stick to skin if held bare. Her movements were careful, almost tender, as she slipped the jaws beneath the first length of wire. The trap had been set by a hand that prized tension more than mercy. She pulled. Metal resisted. Snow fell into the hollow of her collar. For a moment the tool shook, as if it might refuse her will. Then the wire frayed, one strand at a time, like a rope of brittle hair. The mother dog exhaled through her nose, a slow release of pain held quiet. The pup climbed higher across, her shoulder pushing at the trap as if he could lift steel by love alone. Emily paused to breathe. Her chest rose once, twice. The forest around them stood in still witness, pine branches sagging with white weight, wind slipping through needles like the sound of old paper. She cut again. The second wire loosened. Blood moved under the fur, a pulse returning where it had been held back. Snowflakes landed on the dog's eyelashes and did not melt. Emily brushed them away with her thumb. Her hands no longer trembled. Something steadier had taken hold. Not confidence, not skill. A gentler thing, the understanding that forgiveness is sometimes given by those who have most reason to withhold it. The last coil of wire was tight against bone. The angle was bad. If she pulled wrong, the metal would cut deeper. Emily swallowed the doubt. The pup met her eyes, his face close, his breath warm against her glove. Trust passed between them without sound. She shifted her weight, braced the cutter, and pulled with her full strength. The trap snapped open, a sudden release of tension that echoed like a twig breaking under snow. The steel jaws sagged, empty. Pain loosened its grip. The mother dog tried to rise. Her legs trembled, then held. She stood over the puppy, leaning slightly, but with the dignity of an animal that knows her body again. Emily stepped back, giving space. The storm moved around them as if it understood the moment. The mother lowered her head once, slow, deliberate. Her nose brushed Emily's wrist, a touch as light as snowfall. No fear, no demand. A thank you that needed no language. Emily let her breath fall into the winter air. A promise kept feels quiet when it finally settles. They stood there, surrounded by the white world and the warmth of a truth earned through pain. Lives are saved one moment at a time, and sometimes it is enough. Snow drifts across the clearing. The wind quiets, as if listening. Emily steadied the cutter in her hands, breath moving slow, like she measured each inhale against the cold. The steel jaws of the trap held Dakota's leg with a tension that felt older than the storm, like the metal itself had learned to resist mercy. Dakota, the mother, lay half-curled in the snow, her fur frozen in spots where blood had melted and hardened again. Her eyes remained open, steady. They held a depth that made Emily pause, even as the storm urged speed. Pain moved through the dog's body in waves. Each time the cutter pressed the wire, Dakota shivered, but she did not fight. Not a growl, not a flash of teeth. Only the quiet strength of a mother who endures because love is stronger than instinct. Beside her, the puppy pressed close with surprising purpose. His small paws dug into the snow as he mimicked Emily's motion. He pulled at the loose end of a wire coil, head low, jaw clenched, as if understanding where force belonged. Emily watched him once, and something inside her softened. This was not an animal waiting to be saved. This was a child working beside her, carrying his part of the burden. Snow thickened around them, falling without sound, softening the shape of the trees into pale silhouettes. Time dissolved into hands and metal, breath and effort. Emily's fingers numbed. The cutter slipped once. She pulled it tight again, heart beating hard against the memory of a night long ago when she had arrived too late. Each wire cut was a refusal of that memory, a quiet rebellion against the sorrow she had carried into every winter since. The first twist of metal snapped with a brittle crack. Dakota inhaled deep, head lifting slightly. The change was small, but Emily felt it like warmth returning to frozen limbs. The puppy barked once, high, bright, but the sound cracked into a whimper halfway through, as if he remembered pain lived here too. He moved to the second coil without hesitation. Emily shifted her weight, feeling snow settle around her boots. The wind pulled at her coat like a restless hand. She pulled again. Wire gave. Another snap. Relief moved through Dakota's body like a slow ripple. Her chest rose with more strength than before. Emily saw the change not only in breath, but in the eyes. Something loosened there, as if the dog allowed hope to enter a place held tight by pain. The last coil was deep and angled poorly. Emily knew the risk. If she misjudged the pressure, steel could cut deeper, faster. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, not to escape, but to remember why she was here. The past sat beside her like a shadow, reminding her what failure cost. She opened her eyes again, placed the cutter with care, and pressed until her muscles trembled. Metal surrendered. The trap fell open, slack and harmless in the snow. Dakota tried to stand. Her legs shook once, twice, but she rose, drawing her body around the puppy as if shielding him from a danger that had already passed. Emily stepped back, allowing space. Dakota stood taller than she expected, even wounded. She looked at Emily, not as a threat, but as something understood in silence. The dog lowered her head, slowly, deliberate. She stepped forward. Her forehead rested against Emily's hand. Just a moment, light as snowfall. Then, with a gentle nudge, she pushed the puppy toward her, offering the most fragile thing she had: trust. Emily's breath caught. No words could hold the weight of that gesture. Tears formed without force, warm against skin that had been cold too long. Dakota raised her head again and licked the back of Emily's hand, once, like sealing something sacred. The puppy leaned into his mother's chest, safe again. The storm moved around them without urgency, as if the sky itself understood that some moments should not be rushed. Emily let the tears fall quietly. The snow softened the world. Her hands no longer shook. The promise she made long ago, whispered in the dark of another winter, finally found its answer. It did not arrive loud or triumphant. It arrived in the gentle weight of a mother's gratitude, placed in her hand like forgiveness. For a time, the three of them stayed like that, in stillness, breathing the same cold air, held together by a truth simple enough to change her life. Loss can be mended, one life at a time. Morning light settles on the pines like a soft memory. It was late spring when the forest returned to green. Snow had long melted into the soil, leaving dark streaks on the bark where winter once pressed its cold hand. Emily sat at her small desk by the window of the cabin, writing slow notes in a lined notebook. The air inside smelled of wood smoke and coffee and of the quiet hours that come after long work. She had grown used to silence again. The storm felt like a dream that arrived, opened an old wound, and then closed it with unexpected gentleness. She kept the tools from that night cleaned, wrapped in cloth, resting in a drawer near the door, sharpened not for fear, but for readiness. Outside, the sunlight moved through the forest in long columns. It felt like something healing the world. A sound broke the silence, a bark bright and short, carrying memory in its echo. It was not the cry of fear she had heard months ago. It was steady, sure of itself. Emily lifted her head. Her eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but to hold back the tide of feeling that rose too fast. She stood, the chair legs sliding across wood. Her boots thudded once against the floor as she walked to the door. When she opened it, the light of morning folded around her, clean and warm. A young German shepherd stood near the clearing. His coat had darkened into rich black and tan, glossy where the sun touched it. His body had length now, muscles shaped by running wild distances. Yet his eyes were the same, open, deep, carrying the trace of the pup she followed into the storm. He stepped toward her. No urgency, no trembling. He lifted one paw and placed it on her hand. The touch was soft, like the way a child greets someone they know is safe. It carried no demand, no plea, only recognition. A bridge between then and now. Emily let her fingers rest lightly against his leg. She felt warmth, life, the quiet promise that not everything fragile remains broken. Behind him, she noticed movement between the trees. Dakota emerged from the shadows of the forest, strong now, her coat thick, her gait steady. The wound that once held blood and pain beneath the snow was gone, replaced by a quiet dignity. She stood tall, ears forward, watching Emily the way an old friend watches a familiar door. Dakota walked forward with slow, even steps. Emily stayed still, letting the moment come to her. The dog lowered her head, touching her brow gently to Emily's shoulder. No hesitation, no fear. The gesture echoed the night of the storm, but now it held something larger, a thank you offered without pain, only grace. Dakota stayed like that for a breath, then stepped back. Her eyes met Emily's. They held memory, not sorrow, a shared truth born from struggle. Trust is earned where fear might have lived. The clearing seemed to hold its own breath, as if the trees themselves understood the meaning of the reunion. Emily knelt slowly, her knees brushing the soft earth. The young dog leaned his head, near her chest, resting briefly. She placed one hand along the side of his face, tracing the line from ear to jaw, feeling the pulse beneath fur. No words were spoken. None were needed. The forest offered light instead of wind. Somewhere above, a bird called into the morning, a sound like a thread tying seasons together. Emily's breath deepened into her ribs. She felt something loosen inside her, like frost thawing in a place that had stayed cold too long. The regret she had carried was not gone. It had simply changed shape, softened by the chance she was given to make right what she once lost. Dakota turned first, her body flowing back toward the trees. The young dog lingered a moment longer, looking at Emily with a patience beyond his age. She nodded, not to send him away, but to say she understood. He returned the gesture by brushing his muzzle against her fingers, then followed his mother into the forest. Their bodies moved between trunks and light until they became shapes, then shadows, then only memory. Emily remained in the clearing, listening to silence that felt full rather than empty. The morning air touched her cheeks. Somewhere in the distance, she imagined she heard a bark, soft, carried by wind, fading into leaves. She stood slowly, feeling the weight in her chest settle into something gentle. Some losses cannot be undone, she thought, but some lives return to teach us how to begin again. She rested her hand on the doorframe, and the forest waited with her. When we grow old, many of us learn that storms don't always happen outside. They happen in our bodies, in our memories, in long nights when the house is quiet and the heart aches for someone to speak to. But this story reminds us, hope can still walk through the snow and place its paw in our hand. You are not forgotten. Your kindness still matters. Your prayers still matter. If this touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe so we can walk this journey together, and may God bless you with comfort, health, and gentle days ahead.